What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we're checking out an MMORPG that launched all the way back in 2005 for North America, and that's Maplestory. Now, this is a game that I completely missed when I was younger because, I'll be honest with you guys, I was addicted to Halo, Halo 2, World of Warcraft, old school RuneScape. But when I was asked to check the game out just before this new Ignition update, I figured now is a great time to see what this game's all about. I mean, for a game to originally launch in Korea in 2003 and still be around today, there has to be something good about it. And according to MMOPopulation.com, the game is doing very well in terms of player population. Last month, it clocked over 500,000 players in total, and according to the Steam page, they have over 260 million total accounts that have been created for Maplestory, which is just wild. Okay, so let's get into the game. So please keep in mind, I'm a millennial gamer that completely missed the rage of Maplestory in, at this point in time, middle and high school. So I really don't have any nostalgia that's kind of coming in and clouding my first impressions of the game. So if you're someone who really loves it, you get to sort of experience this through the eyes of a brand new player. So to start, let's cover what Maplestory is according to Steam. So Steam says, join over 260 million global players in Maplestory, one of the original MMORPGs, where epic adventure, action-packed gameplay, and good friends await you. Featuring an iconic 2D art style, Maplestory offers the thrill of explosive power, bold anime-style self-expression, and absolute control of your character's awesome abilities. Build your perfect custom hero from over 40 distinct classes with thousands of unique cosmetic options, and set off on your journey to face never-ending challenges and enjoy extraordinary rewards. So that sounds pretty grand in my opinion. So how does it truly hold up? Does it kind of deliver on this promise? Well, I mean, so sort of. So when I first launched Maplestory, I was immediately reminded of the classic standard definition aspect ratio of Days Gone By. Once I loaded in, I had to select a server, and there were tons to choose from. I mean, there was lots. You had normal servers, a burning server for like a limited time event where you can go out and create this burning character, which levels much faster, but you can only have one of these. So you can't, power level the whole cast of characters. So you pick one. And then lastly, there was the reboot server, where the entire focus on the reboot server is on fighting monsters and earning gear through drops in currency rather than trying to earn it through player trade or through the cash shop. So naturally, I chose reboot. I mean, this sounds like a much more entertaining experience than trying to work the cash shop, and this just seemed like the most pure way to enjoy Maplestory. So once you pick a server, you then get to create a character and choose a class. Now let me tell you guys something, okay? I'm not normally an indecisive person. I'm usually pretty kind of dead set on what I want and how I want to play at any given time. I want to be a mage, I'll be a mage. I want to be a warrior, I'll be a warrior. But the class selection screen in Maplestory was pretty tough. You have over 40 different classes, each of which have their own identity, playstyle, skills, strengths, weaknesses, and a story arc, by the way. And some are more difficult to master, while others are geared towards beginners. So if you're new and you want to kind of ease into the Maplestory swimming pool per se, you could choose to dip a toe with a beginner class, or you can head straight to the high dive with a difficult one. Now for me, I chose Adele to start. Not rolling in the deep Adele, but just Adele. This was a warrior archetype that uses illusionary blades to deal damage, and I've been really happy with that decision so far. So I tried out Jet originally, which was sort of like a cowboy bebop looking space cowboy, and then Phantom, which was this like card ripping magician that could steal skills, but neither of those hit home like Adele did. Now, one thing that was a bit confusing at first is that the class isn't necessarily a class, but rather like an actual character. So for instance, I chose Adele, and that is who I am. I am Adele. And in the story, I am referenced as such. It was a very much a different change from like the classic, oh, hail adventurer, or hey hero that I often see in dialogue. Instead, it's Adele, where are you? Not, Volcaster, where are you? And speaking of dialogue, Maplestory has tons of it. Tons of it. Lots of it for the first few hours of the game. I mean, during the introductory quest and the story sequence, there's a ton of dialogue you're gonna have to click through. And I can definitely appreciate the world building aspect, right? The game you're spending tons and tons of time rolling through chat windows, learning about the lore, learning about the story, how things are developing. And there is obviously a lot of time and energy by the developers put into this kind of section of the game to really weave this narrative. And that's fine. But I would also be a liar if I didn't say, after I'd say maybe the first 20 or 30 minutes, I was just spamming through some of it so I could get back into the action, because I really wanted to use all of these cool skills that my class brought to the table. And unfortunately, there were some long stretches of time where I wasn't able to do that. Now, however, I will say, once I was out of the tutorial experience and I got out to exploring the world, the combat became much more plentiful and I felt less antsy and suffocated by story dialogue. So if you're somebody that's sort of like me, where you're like, I just want to get into the action and do stuff, then please be aware, if you try Maplestory, that's something that you're going to have to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about combat. So firstly, as you've probably seen from the gameplay, Maplestory is a 2D side-scrolling MMORPG. If you don't like side-scrollers, this game probably isn't for you. But for me, I don't mind them, because everyone who comes by my channel knows I am very much a variety gamer, and there really isn't a lot that I don't like to play. Now, when it comes to killing stuff, Maplestory does a great job at making you feel powerful, and you're able to carve through large swaths of enemies with ease, and it all feels good. You know, the screen shake, all of the skills, the feedback, you feel powerful. So all throughout the story and into some power leveling maps, I was able to use my skills to clear the screen pretty quickly. I was able to farm out some levels, some extra gear, and it felt good. So when it comes to the power fantasy side of things, there really isn't any lack of oomph behind skills. Now, what did take some getting used to were the controls. So being like a pro mouse gamer, not a professional or skilled mouse gamer, just somebody who's pro mouse versus anti-mouse, it took a little while for me to get used to the idea that I had to use a keyboard to do all of the things. Attacking was keybound to control, jump was bound to alt, and then skills can be linked to any of the other keys, while movement is tied to your arrow keys. All of this was a pretty steep learning curve as I just got dropped into the game, and I'll admit, it did take me quite a while. I ended up jumping at enemies for a little bit instead of using my control key to attack them, and it was something I had to get used to. But once I got it down, it wasn't too bad. Now, I still prefer to use the mouse to aim and, keys to activate skills, but this is serviceable. Now, I wasn't able to do any group content, but from what I've seen online, it looks like it ranges from small to large groups. And as you get into those larger scale boss battles or raids, things get more and more chaotic, which makes sense. So for those that love an end game challenge, it does look like that is there as well. So now that we've covered combat and what that entails, what does combat truly get you? Well, as you go out and you kill stuff, you're going to accumulate experience. And when you accumulate enough of it, you level up, the classic kind of RPG experience. When you level up, you get skill points and you get some stat points. Now, your stat points allow you to increase your primary stats, things like strength, luck, dexterity. Now, there is this really nice auto-assign button that'll automatically spend those points into whatever stat is best for your class. So if you want to take the thought process completely out of it, you can just smash that button and then move on. But if you want to build things a little bit differently, you want like a warrior that for some reason is all in intellect or something, you can always spend those points as you see fit. The other set of points are skill points. These are used to unlock and improve the effectiveness of each skill, whether it's active or passive. And they all begin at 0 points. And then once you spend a single point in each of them, or one of them, your call, you can use them or start benefiting from the passive. And as an action RPG player, my immediate thought was to focus on a single skill and build around it by investing all of my points into that skill that I really like and trying to use it to just wipe out anything in front of me. However, I quickly learned that there are caps to skills, and once you reach them, that is it. So you do need to invest in a couple of skills to really kind of round out your playstyle and how you want to focus on killing enemies or clearing maps. And to build on this, you're also going to unlock new jobs at certain milestones that'll give you even more advanced skills as well. So if you feel like your original set of skills is lacking, because you only get a couple, just level up a little bit and then suddenly you'll have a few more to choose from. Now, the other way to progress is through the acquisition of gear. Now, I played on Reboot, so I can't really speak to how the other servers work, but for this game mode, all drops were from enemies. And let me tell you, there are a lot of pieces to collect. You have a ton of slots to equip different gear pieces into, and with that, you have a lot of things to chase, a lot of BIS items, right? So to make things even more RNG on top of that, You also have gear that has potential, which is sort of like an unidentified item. So you can spend some currency to reveal some extra stats that the item has, or you can just choose to ignore it and then just use the item for its base stats and not have to worry about the potential stats that are still unidentified or hidden. And all of this is very easy to understand. It doesn't really do anything out of the ordinary, and I'm fine with it, right? Some things you just don't want to experiment too much on. When it comes to the world of Maplestory, there are no shortages of areas to explore and work towards. And this is 100% because of the game's longevity. They continued to add expansion after expansion until the game grew to just a massive size. So if you love to explore new areas, there definitely isn't a shortage of those. However, the one thing I will say is that getting around isn't exactly easy to understand or even easy to do. So for instance, I was level 54-ish. I accepted a level 50 quest and I got teleported to some temple to complete it. Long story short, I wasn't able to complete it because it was a party, like a group quest only, and then no one wanted to group for it. And when I tried to leave, I ended up in a level 150 zone and I got bodied immediately. Instant death, vaporized. I ended up in a town and then I was sort of stranded with no way to get back to the right area because all the surrounding areas were level 150. So I was sort of just stuck. And long story short, I finally made it back, right? I got back to, Starter Island basically, but it seemed like a much more difficult process than it really needs to be, especially when a level appropriate quest sent me there to begin with, right? It sent me into a death trap and said, good luck. And that just, it wasn't a fun experience. So that might be something they need to really work on. Understand when those quests need to come up and then give players an option or maybe an item in their inventory to sort of head back to where they came from. So the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this whole thing up is the cash shop, specifically on the reboot server, because I know people will have questions. So from my experience and from the perspective of the reboot server, everything out here was cosmetic with no real way to purchase power unless I'm misunderstanding something. However, you can purchase pets. And in this game, pets are incredibly convenient. They pick up items so you don't have to. And let me tell you, I saw a huge difference between not having a pet just vacuuming up all of the loot versus having one. When I didn't have my pet, I would spend a lot of time smashing the Z key to pick up items off the ground. When I did have my super snail, which was my pet that I got, he did a great job. He just literally sucked up anything that fell on the ground and I immediately had it and it was awesome. But over time, your pets will fatigue, they'll go into sort of like a dormant state and then you won't be able to use them unless you feed them or reactivate them. And so that's sort of the cycle there. So I would say if you want to play Maplestory, I would definitely recommend doing it on reboot. That way you can avoid feeling the pressure of the cash shop, at least in the 10 hours that I've played so far. So let's talk about my final thoughts with this game. So after my time with Maplestory, remember, this is me never having played it before, I walked away with a positive impression of the game. And I can see why players would spend lots of time in that world, and I can also understand and respect why that game has been around for as long as it has. The storytelling is done fairly well. There's these anime cutscenes that are just super fun to watch. I feel like I'm actually watching like some sort of anime show, which is amazing. And the gameplay is super strong for a side-scrolling MMO. Now, where I do think the game needs to improve would be around that story fatigue I talked about earlier. A new player experiences a ton of dialogue and a ton of story and not a lot of action for the first hour or two of the game. And that's just not exactly a fun experience for them, especially if they aren't a fan of dialogue, because they might end up quitting before they even get to experience the actual world of Maplestory. In addition to that, the overwhelming amount of things to do can be incredibly staggering for players. And this is something that all older MMOs experience and they kind of suffer from, is they put players into a position where they sort of have blinders on for the tutorial. And then after that, they just open the whole game up and suddenly you have all of these kind of like flashing things to click on. You have all of these NPCs to talk to, and there's just a ton. And for somebody that's experienced in this world, even I was overwhelmed a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening. So I would highly recommend either like a beginner's guide or a more structured experience for newer players. But outside of those two things, I had a really good time. I would recommend it to anyone who's a fan of MMOs to check out. It's free to play. And if you want to look at it, you can do so by visiting the link in the description below. So I want to hear from you guys. Have you played Maplestory before? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, this has been Vulkan, and I will see you guys on the next video.